Hi, Tourpreneurs. It's Mitch, Bach, and we are back with another episode of the Tourpreneur Travel Business Podcast. Today, my guest is Rodrigo Atuesta, and we are going to Colombia. We are going to be talking all things Colombian travel experiences with the CEO of Impulse Travel. And today, I think, is a very exciting conversation because it solves for a lot of the questions that we hear constantly in our community, which are centered around working with DMCs, working in partnership with other tour operators, other organizations in your destination. And I think for me, Rodrigo also just has a really inspirational story. And so, no pressure, Rodrigo, but you have to inspire us today. And thanks for joining us on Tourpreneur.
Oh, Mitch, it's a great honor. It feels great to pass from a listener and turn tables and then be at the studio with you. Well, at our virtual studio. So yeah, it's great to be here and to share everything about Colombia and all the work that we have been doing for 13 years now as a local operator and DMC.
So 13 years of building up a travel ecosystem in Colombia, but you didn't wake up one day and just say, I know I'm going to be a DMC now. What were the roots of Rodrigo in sort of the travel industry? How did this all come about?
Hmm. Um, it's hard to find the roots. It's like large rivers, large rivers. No one knows where they start because they have many different small affluents. But I can point at a couple of affluents that are very important. Number one is couch surfing. I used to be a couch surfer since I was very little. Even when I was living with my mom in Bogota, I must have been 14, 15. I learned about this community, and it was just very exciting to know that I could host people and then go to travel to their countries and being hosted by them. So I started hosting people when I was living with my mom at a very early age. And I think that started um, to teach me a lot about travel and a lot about interactions. And the other starting point that I would say is it's related to my dad, actually. Colombia being a place in where I was born in 89. So during my childhood was the 90s and the early 2000s. The toughest years for Colombia, the cartels, drug war. Colombia was a no-go place when I was around 7, 8. But my dad was very courageous, and he would take my brother and I to travel by land to many parts of Colombia. So since I was little, I didn't grow up with the fear of my own country and my own people that a lot of people who grew up in cities had, because it was unimaginable to just take the road and do a tour around the country as I did with my dad and my brother. So I think these two things added to the fact that I wanted to travel when I graduated from university. I didn't study anything related to hospitality, as many of the listeners I know. People come from many different backgrounds. My background is in industrial engineering, but when I finished my undergrad, I decided to travel for a year. To do that, I needed to earn some money. Since I was already in couchsurfing, I thought that the easiest way to earn money was being a tour guide in my hometown, as a freelance tour guide, studying and working. And that's how everything started for me.
Okay, a lot to unpack there. I love, as a former guide myself, any story that begins with guiding because I feel like the guides are the ones that learn the hard lessons. They learn how to please the customer. They learn instinctively what makes for a well-designed tour experience. They're not sort of imagining it from an ivory tower from far away. They live the daily experience of pleasing a guest. So I love that. But I wanna dive into actually those two buckets really quickly. First, of inspiration, your mom and your dad. Couch surfing. I remember my early days of traveling around Europe, traveling around the world, couch surfing as well. I'm interested in the lessons that you learned in terms of, I guess, hospitality, guest experience, the travel experience, what makes travel memorable, specifically from that unique vantage point of couch surfing.
Well, Mitch, I think that what really resonated with couchsurfing, which is still, I would say, a core pillar upon which Impulse is built, is the idea of meaningful interactions. And as you know, couchsurfing is not about the money. You don't host anyone. I mean, you're not supposed to be paid, or you're not supposed to pay anyone. You just do it because you legitimately believe that it's worth going and visiting a person that you don't know yet, and it's all about what happens in these interactions. So I was a great host. I would just walk my guests around, and I didn't know much about history or the date of the independence or things like that. I'm still not great at Colombian history, but I remember that a lot of the conversations were more about the future than about the past, and also to hear all the misconceptions that the people had about Colombia and how everyone was so impressed to feel that Bogota was such a modern city and that the the cultural scene was so lively and that uh, Colombia was very far from what they imagined. That was something that was very inspirational for me at that point, and it still is. And it was a great motivator to start a travel company to kind of raise misconceptions about Colombia as a proud Colombian. And through travel and through these meaningful interactions and experiences, people would live being ambassadors of Colombia. So yeah, that in short.
I love the idea that because you were a couch surfing host and not a guide, your job was just to be with someone and have a quality conversation. I feel like actually, in some ways, when you enter the industry as a quote unquote professional guide, your head gets so wrapped up in the knowledge about your destination that sometimes it's easy to forget that at the root is that meaningful connection or that meaningful interaction to have with someone.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you use that word though, meaningful interaction, what else does that mean to you? Because that's a really powerful and simple concept.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Uh, well, for me, it starts with the idea of so one of the ways that I see the work that we do at Impulse is that we feel like we're a networking platform for the soul, meaning that at a spiritual level, I believe that we all came to this existence to learn, and we do that by learning with other souls that we some of these souls are family, some are people that we just meet randomly, and I think that meaningful interactions are something that are interactions that came to teach us things about ourselves and things about uh, navigating the complexity and the beauty of this world, and that inspire us. So that's in my life as a traveler and traveling Colombia extensively, the way that these interactions with local people and the local entrepreneurs that we work with all across Colombia, with other guides, with experts, with musicians, with change makers, have created a path for me. And so this aspect of meaningful interactions is at the core of what we truly believe that is the greatest aspect of travel, and that's how we have built the whole concept of Impulse.
So I'm going to dive into that more because I'm fascinated by that. A networking platform for the soul. What an interesting way to think about your job as a tour operator. I love it. The other thing that I wanted to just begin with is thinking about the country of Colombia and what you learned from those early days of traveling, as you said, in a place that is so associated with a sense of danger. What did that mean to you as you began thinking about building a company that's also an ambassador for changing a global perception of what a country is about?
Hmm. I think it has to be a team effort. There is not a single company, not Impulse, not Rodrigo and Juliana, that can tackle this alone. And I think that's one of the reasons why there's so much collaboration and this feeling of being together as an industry here. And that's one of the things that I really love about working in tourism. And I think a lot of people that are listening to this, who are in travel and who are tourpreneurs, are people who thrive in um, atmospheres in which there's a lot of good collaboration and not competition. And if it's their competition, it's more like a sports competition. Um, so I think that's one of the things that has brought Colombia's travel industry together. Also, every travelers is an ambassador. We haven't had, I think we have already serviced, we're about to cross the 30,000 travelers mark. None of them has had a safety issue. I mean, there was a couple of people who have been pickpocketed, but that can happen anywhere. But no one has been kidnapped. No one has been assaulted, and that really speaks to the fact that in Colombia, of course, there's still a lot of issues. But if you collaborate with a local travel company, and this Colombian travel company works with communities, we will really know how to keep our travelers out of harm's way. And the risk, as the old campaign that I really love and I think that has resonated, is the risk is wanting to stay.
I love that. Was that a like a Colombia DMO message at one point? Was that? Yeah, I mean, I love that.
I think it was somewhere I think that was one of the first campaigns when the DMO started to get the voice out there about Colombia. I think it was around 2010 or something like that. And I think that message really embodied the spirit of Colombia and this part of the misconception, and that, people in Colombia are incredibly welcome. There was another study carried by the Colombia's DMO Pro Colombia, to understand what was the largest competitive advantage of Colombia, and it turns out that it's the people, and it's the way that people who have traveled to places with over-tourism and places like Barcelona, that you as a traveler feel like you're not welcomed, and you see graffitis like "Gringos go home" or things like that. In Colombia, is the complete opposite.
You want to get shot? Go to Barcelona. They got squirt guns pointed at you in a cafe. when you're working with like a B2B partners, let's say a travel advisor or somebody that's like thinking about coming to Colombia, how do you as an operator, as a DMC, sort of message the destination? Like, how do you balance that, the two sides of the message? You want to assure safety and you want to promote the quality of the place as well.
For us, the number one thing is, if we're working with B2B partners, is having them come to Colombia. Once they come, once they see, once they feel the warmth of the people, and once they perceive that, a lot of people say, like, I have felt much more vulnerable in some places of Washington D.C. than in Bogota. So I would say that it's more about misperception, and going back to the point of the how. Fam trips, bring them down here, or if they come, show them around, and when they feel it by themselves, and they feel this confidence about being here, that's a game changer for them promoting Colombia.
Are you hosting your own fam trips, or are you working with other operators and DMCs together?
We do our own, but we also work with Pro Colombia or DMO, and I think they understood this strategy very well early on, so they're opening open calls all the time for companies like us to apply, and they have a score, and whoever gets the best score is selected as an operator for the fam trip, and they pay half of the cost of the fam trip, and they partner usually airlines for the airfare of the international visitor. So it's an investment that is a joint effort between us and the Colombian government. So that's one side, and the other side is doing our own fam trips. We are getting away from this idea of fam. It's not about familiarizing. We see them more as a training trips. Is more about what we want is people to come when operators and travel advisors come. We're actually thinking about putting this in the format of a course to understand Colombia. So after 7 days, they graduate as Colombia travel experts with us. So it's about sharing our expertise with them, and also building new expertise together.
How do you look at all the offerings you have and decide what you're going to build as a fam tour, and then also, as a training tour, and then how do you choose your audience? How do you select the right people to visit?
Okay, so how to choose from all of these experiences, it's very tough, because the experiential offer in Colombia is infinite, and we're very lucky to be working with amazing people in all parts of Colombia, and so it's more about making a match of the visitors that are coming and the country they're coming from and the segment they represent and the kind of experiences we have in our repertoire for them to find more resonance with. So I'll give you an example. We have an upcoming fan trip with ProColombia. They're going to bring 6 operators from the luxury Italian market that want to expand their operations in Colombia. So the fan trip we did with them is only Bogota and Cartagena, which is where most of the luxury offer is concentrated. And we're going to do, for example, in Bogota, a tour with a fashion designer that is centered around up-and-coming fashion designers in Bogota, she being one of them. So she's basically going to take them around and introduce them to all her friends. And in Cartagena, we have many different experiences. One of them is a joint effort that we do with Café San Alberto, which is called a coffee baptism, which is baptizing people with Colombian coffee. And it's a great experience for the luxury market. And the accommodations are aligned with that. And so it's about understanding who is coming and what kind of experiences can resonate more, not only with their travelers, but also with their souls. Again, going back to this concept of the network of the souls, we try to bring people with similar interests. And how to choose them? Well, the ones we do with ProColombia is generally ProColombia who gets to choose them. But the ones that we do our own, we choose them. To put it in a very simple way, we choose the people we like to be friends with. Because what ultimately happens after traveling together for 8 days, a lot of times the sales cycle is very slow. Sometimes it's even 3-4 years until we see a traveler coming from them. But what does happen every single time is that we end the trip as friends, and we have very insightful conversations, and they also become ambassadors of our brand, and they connect us to other people. So it's more about the people who we think we can have quality time with.
Are you scrolling through lists of Italian travel agents? Are you meeting them somewhere? Like, they don't just all hang out in the same cafe in Rome.
Yeah, well, that part of the work is being done by our DMO, by ProColombia, but the ones that we can choose, it's more like we have a mailing list of people that we have met or we have heard about or we follow on social media, and people that we want to become friends with. So when we open our own fam trips, we send them an email, and they have to apply, and we assess their maturity of their product in Colombia. We like to work with people who are not as mature, like that they have already established relationships with other DMCs, but we like people that have at least some adjacencies with Colombia. People, maybe operators who are already selling trips to Costa Rica, Ecuador, Peru, or specialized in Latin America and emerging destinations. If it's an operator that just focuses on Europe and Middle East, maybe it's very far from them to be worthwhile for us as a company to invest in bringing them to Colombia.
So from little Rodrigo, the tour guide, to 30,000 customers and being a huge force in Colombian travel, what was that journey like? What was that path? Talk to me about how you went from being a guide to being this entity now.
It's been a wild journey, and a lot of it feels sometimes like that same Rodrigo is the one that is talking now. I think that at a fundamental level, a lot of things have not really changed. Of course, there's been a lot of maturity, and I think it has all been carved by people, especially by the people who have really shaped what Impulse is right now, bringing their perspective and taking us by the hand and sharing some of their secret sauce with us. and helping us create our secret sauce as well. And I can pinpoint just off the top of my head Cata Mayorga from El Camino Travel. El Camino is a company that we really admire, and we have been working with them for many years. And Cata, over the years, has become like my
Love
older
her.
sister. Yeah.
Shout out to Kata. She's the one that brought us together. So
Mhm.
love what she's doing with El Camino. Okay.
And so, and Kata was, I mean, the level of work that we do with Kata has set the standard for the kind of level of work we want to do with other companies, which is really about co-creation. It's not about us having a set of package and that we have in a drawer and then we push it to whoever fits. It's really about understanding what they want to do, what are their business challenges, how they want to differentiate, what works for them in other countries, and then bringing that together with a local expertise and really making co-creations, and that's fascinating. So that was one of the key influencers, and also I think a very inspirational one for us is Mitch, Aziz Abu Sara. I heard he came to Colombia in 2016, and he gave a talk about peace building and tourism, and Colombia being a country with so much challenges and so much work to do in peace building. He was like light. He was like a beacon of light for me. It was wow. It was like, yes, tourism can not only bring people together, can not only create meaningful interactions, but tourism can really move the needle in terms of peace building and bringing opportunities to people. So that was like a big turning point. And then after that, I also have to mention Booking Booster, an accelerator that was an acceleration program that was created by Booking.com. Sadly, it stopped to exist after the pandemic because it was amazing the work that they did, the amount of resources they invested in the 10 startups that they picked for every cohort worldwide, and also they allocate a grant for each of the startups to reach the next level, and they give us a mentor. In our case, it was Joseph Levine. He's still the head of product at Booking.com. So having that kind of mentorship and that kind of money and support from such a huge player in the industry was definitely a change maker. And most recently, putting an amazing board together of people who are uh, amazingly versed and seasoned in the travel industry and who feel the same passion that we feel about meaningful human interactions and who want to see us grow as a company and want to see what we propose to the travel industry to reach new heights.
We have a lot of listeners who work in Fair Harbor of the podcast, which is a booking.com company. And so if any of you are listening, can you please walk down the hallway to Glenn Fogel's office and tell him to reinstate the Booking Booster program? That
Please.
sounds like a really cool.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I just want to pause on that because I love these incubators, accelerators. They exist in startups all around the world, in that kind of startup culture for travel tech and everything. I love the idea that Booking invested in building a company like yours that has the vision and just needed the I guess guidance and the money to enact it. What did you learn in that program? Like how is that helpful for you? Obviously the money, the mentorship, but break it down. Like what did you learn?
Hmm. I remember that we got to Amsterdam, great hotel, then we went to the Booking.com's headquarters, took a tour around, and it was fascinating. As an entrepreneur coming from Colombia, and then uh, playing with the big kids, right? And I remember the first session was about self knowledge, and at the beginning was like, wait, I thought we were going to be talking about tech and about bringing investment, and of course we did all that as well, but I think the greatest impact that Booking had on my path was more on the soft level than on the hard level. Back then, it was Gillian Tense, and I remember Gillian walking in the room and introducing us to her coach, who was going to be talking about self leadership, and she said something that I'm always going to remember, and she said, "A good leadership is the capacity to reinvent yourself." And that didn't really, and that was before the pandemic, where this work was really in about at their point. But Killian was, and I was like, wait, where am I? Am I at Booking.com or am I at a spiritual retreat in California? And the whole process of understanding myself as a leader, and also to learn to be vulnerable in leadership positions, to guide teams from that perspective. I think part of the spirit of Booking.com, at least back then, there was a lot of humbleness, and that was something that really stuck. And apart from that, the whole aspect of the training in, we also got to understand our impact strategy very well, and how impact strategy can be connected and can be moved with the economic engine of a sound business model that is connected to a market, and how all that is related in a theory, and then how to bring into the practice. And that was fascinating. That really shaped what we are now as a company, and our understanding of impact tourism, and the results that we have achieved in that regard.
Wow, that's incredible. I remember years ago calling up one of my friends who started young and grew in several companies out in California. And at a certain point, she had 500 people under her, and she had really blossomed into an incredible leader. And I called her up and I said, I think I'm a really bad boss and I need some guidance. Like, I'm a micromanager, I'm obsessive, I'm a little too, I don't know, aggressive. And I said, is there something that I could read that you would recommend? Like, how did you learn to become a leader? She recommended Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead. And I keep a quote around all the time, and it made me think of what you had just said. And the quote from this book is, I define a leader as anyone who takes responsibility for finding the potential in people and processes, and who has the courage to develop that potential. And I feel like that sense of vulnerability, and that sense of not focusing it on you as the guru, the head, the master of this, company, but rather, like, my job is to serve you, my employees, to bring out your potential, to foster you. Takes a lot of humility, and a different kind of understanding of what you're building as a company.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree to that, and I really like Brené's way to understand leadership, and that's something that we really took a lot internally, not only for the team in terms of leadership skills, but we also work with a lot of people in the ground, especially in local communities that are building peace building projects, and they are social and environmental leaders. So we've got to the conclusion that it's very aligned with this definition of leadership, and we got to the conclusion that leadership is anyone who is aware of their impact on other people and acts from this awareness. It doesn't have to be someone who shows off and who speaks and who moves people. Then there's many different leadership styles, but at the core, I think that leadership has to do with that, with awareness of the impact we have on other people.
And therefore, it's a responsibility. It's an obligation to live up to what you see. And I think there's a sense sometimes that these ideas of company culture or impact come later. Like, they're almost something nice to think about once you're profitable. Talk to me about how you built a company with this idea at the core of a business that you're building, and not just sort of a nice mission-based hobby or something you added on as window dressing afterwards.
Okay, are you in for a story?
Make me cry. Come on, let's do it.
Right. It was 2016 in Colombia. After 5 years of Colombian government sitting with the largest rebel group in Latin America called FARC, operating in Colombia, they were negotiating a peace agreement for 5 years at Cuba. And then they got to a final draft of the agreement that would end war in Colombia, at least that part of the war, government against this major guerrilla group. The At that time, I had already traveled Colombia extensively, especially the territories that were more affected by violence. And everyone in these territories, no exception, was supporting this agreement because they were the ones who lived the impact of violence firsthand. And they were ready to move on. They were ready to say, okay, let's close this file, let's turn the page, let's work together towards reconciliation instead of trying to kill each other until we finish off with the rebels, right? Which was never going to happen. So there was a referendum where the Colombian government asked the general public if we were agree with the peace agreement. And it was a very political time in Colombia. I remember it was a very large generational divide. Usually older people were for no and younger people were for yes. And people in the cities who lived the conflict from the outside were for no, and people who actually experienced the conflict were for yes. So it was a lot of conversations, and what ended up happening there is that Colombia voted for no, like 51% against 49. So the peace agreement was not validated by the general public in this referendum. It was a heartbreaking moment for me, and in my political views, I of course respect those who voted for no. There's a lot of arguments, and I'm not going to enter in that. But the fact is that connected to Impulse, what happened, that was a Sunday. And I remember we must have been like 6 people back then in Impulse. And we thought like, okay, so this is, okay, our activism of going to the polls and putting an X on a paper did not do the job. We're not going to stand with our arms crossed. And what is a role in this moment that we have as entrepreneurs in travel? How can we connect it to the largest problem that we're living in a society? And again, networks of the soul. For a reason, a friend of me who is also a guide, a couple of days after that, she called me and she said, like, I met this guy who just came out of prison from a no-go. He's original from a no-go area in Bogota, and he wants to start local tours in his neighborhood, Barrio Egipto. And I was like, what? I would never go there. And she was like, you have to give him a chance. And so I remember that I went that same week after this the peace agreement. I went that way to meet this guy who just came out of prison. He had been convicted for murder, and he had spent 6 years in prison. And he came out, and he wanted to, his motivation was not to make his children to go through the same experiences that he went through. So he decided to start tourism because, of course, his employability was none. It was no way he was going to be employed, and he happened to be a great storyteller. So I did a tour with him, and I thought, okay, there's something really interesting here. And we started working together, building the content. So I started to kind of doing the tour over and over with him, giving feedback and some ideas about the narrative and how to tell the story from a different angle. And that tour started to take off and take off and take off. And after 1 year running the tour, we detected that the homicide rate for this specific community had plummeted from almost 100 a year to 0. And that was correlation, or it was a direct impact of tourism. We don't really know. But what we know is that tourism brought some aspects to this community that changed the course of the community, together with a great leadership from a local. So that started our path in social entrepreneurship. It was a bit by accident, a bit by motivation of the largest scheme of things and a huge political and social issue that Colombia had, and also by mere accident. And then we started to become more aware of how we did that and how to replicate that in other parts of Colombia, and this is how the whole part of impact in Impulse started.
Wow. A lot to unpack there. The first reaction I have to that is it's a completely different way of thinking about designing an experience. You looked at place and said, not what can I do here, but what is the need? what is this place about, and what is the struggle, what is the hope, the opportunity. You met someone and then you cultivated them. It sounds like through a almost iterative sort of design process of helping him become the best version of who he is, connecting it to what the place is about, and designing something authentic to that person in that place, and that you coming in as the operator and imposing your understanding of what you think tourism is on it.
Absolutely. It's all about co-creation. This is why this CO dash everything is central to what we are at Impulse. It's and that wouldn't have been possible if it was not because of their impulse to create that. And we joined forces. It's not like we went and as an NGO and did an scouting there and we decided that tourism was what they needed and started
The
to make an
savior.
call. It was them. It was like, hey, we want to do tourism, and it was like, I know how to do tourism. I can join, right? And that's been the same model that we have replicated over and over in many local communities of Colombia. A lot of them are in a more mature state in their journey as local entrepreneurs. Others are at a very early stage, but we love working with them because there's so much learning. Every time that we start working with one of these projects, we come to the other side as a different company.
What an interesting way to grow a company, by just going around co-creating and seeing what blossoms from your connection with these places. Tell me more about what that design process looks like. How does it look in practice as you learned some of these lessons and then looked to the rest of of Colombia and said, "This is how I want to build a business."
Right. Yeah, that's something that is sort of at the core of our business. This co-creation process. So at some point, actually, during booking Accelerator, um, it was, if it's at our core, we need to understand it, and we kind of need to theorize on it. Of course, the theory is only a map and not a territory. But if we are gonna navigate a territory, we need a map, right? So we came up with an acronym, which is HEART, as the heart that is beating on our chests, and we connect with each other from the heart, and the heart being this organ that keeps us alive, and it's like this life force energy. So we like the idea of the heart for many reasons, and the letters in the heart ended up fitting perfectly with what we were doing. It's like a beautiful synchronicity, really. So H, it stands for human connection. So once again, it's all about human encounters, meaningful interactions. We like to put the creators, the co-creators, which are change makers. Also, some of them can be artists, some of them can be academics, some of them can be even, we have worked with a lot with musicians, of course, and it's putting the human aspect of it. It's not about where and when. It's more about the what with whom.
I love that.
Mhm.
I love that. Rodrigo, you drop all of these great little sayings. I'm going to start a quote page, a Rodrigo quote page on tourpreneur.com.
Thank you. I feel honored. But yeah, I must say that none of this is mine. I'm just being a conduit for hundreds of people that have been building this dream. I'm just representing them.
That's what a good leader would say. That's what a good leader would say. Well done. Okay, continue. So H, human-centered. It's all
Human-centered.
always going back to that connection. Love it.
Yes. So E, economic opportunities. And E is very important because tourism is a massive economic force. I'm not going to go into that. I think all the listeners here know how much tourism can drive in terms of economics. And in the case of Colombia, and also in the case of this context that we work with, is being aware that this E from economics is the engine that is moving larger engines. So it's about being intentional. What kind of engine we want to fuel and what kind of engine we don't want to fuel at all. So if we decide where we bring the money and who is going to be connected to the value chain, and if these connections and the economic opportunities are moving the wheels for social change for conscious cultural involvement, and for companies that are really bringing values and taking care of their communities and their ecosystems. That's something that is signaling that it's hard experiences. So E for economic opportunities, right? Being conscious about what are the wheels that we're moving when we're bringing every dollar to every hand. Okay, A for authentic. So authenticity in tourism it's a very tricky word. The way we understand it, or something that guides us, is we never set anything on a stage, and we never ask our hosts to perform or do anything just for tourism. Just do it as you would normally do it. I give you an example. We work a lot with indigenous communities, and there's some operators that like to, it's more interesting in the pictures where we see indigenous wearing their feathers and their traditional dresses. But the fact is that in many indigenous communities, you would go there and people are just dressing like in shorts, and maybe they have Colombia's football team T-shirt. It's and we're not going like, hey, why didn't you put your feathers on, or why didn't you put your, it's not about making something exotic. We also so that's a case of authenticity. We don't change how things are, and we see that there's magic in the fact that they're not. It's reality, and we can have a conversation with travelers why they're not wearing their feathers anymore, and whether that was on their best interest or not. And there's a lot of things to learn from them. And also, for example, we don't like to do like staged things. So again, we do a lot of things with music, and whenever we do something with music, it's not like travelers on the table with a dinner, clapping along. It's more about them being part of, playing instruments or learning a dance, or so it's more about the authenticity of this whole experience, and not putting a division between travelers and performers. So R, it's for regenerative narrative. So or we have a play in words like regeneratives. Mm, the R is very important in terms of the psychological and motivational aspect that tourism brings to the table, because we realize by working with communities that have been impacted by war and who have been victims of other aspects of climate change or deforestation or things like that, if communities who they can tell their stories from two different perspectives. They can either tourism, by coming there and being interested in their stories, can enter in a process of re-victimizing, or the other aspect is telling the narrative from a regenerative aspect of the narrative. So it's more about looking toward the future and redefining their past. So that's the R, and it's very important for us because that's a lot of the communities have a voice through tourism, and we want to make sure that this voice is created in a way that is empowering and that is not undermining them. And T is for top-notch. We want to make sure that the quality is there. A lot of our travelers are affluent people from US and Europe who are not willing to pay with discomfort or with poor hygiene or with bad roads and things like that. So we make sure that the quality of the service is great. We make sure that everyone feels comfortable in participating and bringing people to these communities, to these artists, to these restaurants, to these fashion designers, and it has to be there. The T has to be there for us. So that's HEART, and that's an acronym for how we approach our product development, our product co-creation with all these creators all across Colombia.
How long does that process take?
Sometimes years, sometimes a day. It varies a lot. We create a lot of experiences. Sometimes we create experiences that only one operator has. Let's say there was one case that there was someone who had a challenge, and they wanted to have a family dinner but they want to be a local house in Cartagena that could fit up to 14 people. So we had to go out there and look for a traditional cook. And we ended up finding a lesbian couple, who are amazing cooks, and they safeguard the traditional Cartagena food. And they have a very humble house, very small, but very beautiful, nicely decorated. And their food is amazing, and they're amazing people. So we basically, it took me one afternoon to design this product. It was sitting with them, cooking together, identifying what they were interested in, the way they talk about their situation, and the fact that they're gay, and I said, okay, the R is there, right? So sometimes it's very fast, and sometimes, like for example, with Breaking Borders in this Egypt neighborhood, the one that I told you an example about, that's an ongoing work. We hadn't finished. And I don't think we'll ever finish with a community that has suffered such a amount of violence, and where all these threats of young people being pulled and gravitating towards criminal activity, it's still there. So that's still an ongoing process.
All right, so I'm going to play devil's advocate with this framework, which is gorgeous, beautiful, perfect. It is. You are like the you are the Adam and Eve. You were like the model of the idea of a tour operator. It's great. In practice, imagine I'm listening to this and I'm saying, I'm just a walking tour guide, or I just have a walking tour company. I do food tours of New York City. How does this apply to me? I'm just trying to sell my tours and get more customers through Viator and Get Your Guide. What does this mean in terms of me trying to think about who I am as a business?
That's a great question. I never asked myself that, because we're so centered in Colombia that I never thought of building a hard experience in New York City. But if you look at the framework, every single letter of it can apply to many different contexts. Of course, New York City has not had a recent war, right? So if we're talking about
I don't know. Some news channels think we have, but yeah.
Okay, that apart.
Okay, sorry. Go on.
But I'm actually gonna peep back on that, because there's actually a lot of R in terms of regenerative narratives that can be done even in New York. Me in New York, this center of the world, is like the world's capital, and the processes that the world is going through with xenophobia, and all the war that is going on in the Middle East, and in Europe, and in so many different parts of the world, and New York being a place where everything converges, I think there's a great opportunity to bring a narrative for regeneration from this standpoint, not only as a specific society of a country, but a way that we can touch buttons in people's hearts to understand their humanity in a different way by exposing them to diverse ideas. So I think that really could apply anywhere in the world if you're intentional enough. Hard, of course, the human connection. If you're a guide, make it about your life history. And if you're bringing people to restaurants, leave the food for, the food is going to happen. But introduce who's the cook, bring them out, give them an applause when the dinner is done, right? Bring the people to the forefront. Economics, there's so many different ways to understand it, and you can choose who your suppliers are based on maybe you can work with the smaller businesses who can really use your business to thrive. Maybe there's a super famous cheesecake place that they're really thriving, and they do really good as a business, but you can also go to other places in Brooklyn, like Little Caribbean, and find these mom and pops shops that are really thriving, and help to put your travelers' money there. Authenticity, of course. There's so many ways to being authentic, especially in a place like New York. I think New York in itself is a very authentic city in many regards. So I think that would apply. We already talked about the R and top notch. I think that applies worldwide. We all understand as tour guides what a top-notch service delivery is. So yeah, there you go. I think heart can be translated to many different geographies.
Done. Okay, I'm going to give you a new location. No, joking. I love that. I love that. I mean, it touches back with the word you said before, which is just like a good leader is aware that this is a framework, and it causes you to be aware of these different categories of ways of being intentional about what you're doing wherever you are. And the execution looks different, obviously, in New York than Colombia.
Hmm.
I have a thing that I often find myself saying to tour operators and to myself, which is the customer is usually wrong. In America, we've always said the customer is always right. Give them what they want, right? Like you have to give them where they want to go, what they want to do, what they want to eat. And usually I just find that they don't know what they don't know. They don't understand actually that what they want is something deeper and more meaningful and more nutritious than the kind of flashy things they've seen on TV. I'm wondering how you balance the need to deliver a product that is sellable with also knowing that sometimes what you can deliver differently than what they want is often so much richer and so much better.
Great question. The first word that came to my head, like top of mind, is sugarcoating. So I'm gonna give you an example for that. I don't want to go back again and again to Egypt to breaking borders. So I'm gonna go to, for example, to Medellin, right? We have there a tour that is called "We Don't Talk About Pablo," referring, of course, to the infamous drug lord Pablo Escobar. There's a lot of Pablo tours, and that was a way to respond to demand because it's very demanded. And I must admit that in my early days, back in 2014, I did resell Pablo Escobar tours. Not that I'm proud of, but when I went to Medellin, I realized that it was basically paying tribute to this character that has caused so much pain and trouble. I was like, wait, this doesn't sound like a great idea. So when we came up with Heart, was like, how are we going to turn the tables on the Pablo Escobar demand? Because people, I mean, you can't fight against it. People are curious. People watch Netflix and they watch Narcos and they want to know more. And it's not about blaming them. There's a lot of Colombian companies who take the stance of, blaming the customer either for being consumers of cocaine or either for being interested in Pablo Escobar. We don't do either of that. We just bring a different approach. So we created this tour called We Don't Talk About Pablo that brings the whole conversation to the phenomenon of the narco traffic. We, of course, touch on Pablo Escobar, but we go beyond Netflix because everyone's on Netflix. We also demystify a lot of the things that happen on Netflix. And we also talk about more about the victims and the impact of the narco traffic on ecosystems, on society, on economics, and the realities of it. You take your own conclusions. You had a lot of information of a theme that you were interested in, but it was from a very different standpoint, right? So that's like sugar coating the Pablo Escobar candy, right? So that's an example that I can share with you to answer that question.
I think that's a great answer. You're acknowledging the demand, you're meeting it, but then taking them on a different journey. That's still satisfying and probably actually.
Yeah. We haven't been able to do that with sex tourism. Because of course sex tourism it's a reality in Colombia and it's something that we really fight against. Not only Impulse, but all the companies that believe in the right way of doing tourism and yeah, it's a challenge we have. So if there's any ideas from the audience and how to sugarcoat and build something around that that we can do as Impulse Travel, we're super open for ideas. Great. We want to capture that demand, right? We want to capture people who want to come to Colombia to, quote unquote, have fun and come, to do their thing. And we want to also to be able to talk to them and to connect with them from their humanity as well, right?
You're about to get
big challenge.
You're about to get 50 emails in your inbox saying I've solved sex tourism in the subject line. Your wife is going to be like, what is going on? As we approach the end of the hour, I wanted to wrap up by going back to the beginning, which is that you say, because of the circumstances of Colombian tourism, there was a sort of built-in impulse to collaborate with others. What have you learned about building collaborations and cooperation with your fellow tour operators instead of just seeing them as competition that I have to beat?
Hmm. I think I'll have to go once again back to humanity. It's about connecting, knowing that behind other companies and people that you're competing against for market cap or whatever, or these for that group, or there's also people behind them. And if you give your a chance to really meet them and connect to them from a human perspective as opposed to competitor perspective, there's so many rewards. And in the case of Impulse, from a very early stage, I took the initiative to reach out to every single Colombian travel company that I saw emerging in social media. Just reaching out to them like, hey, I'm Rodrigo from Impulse. Like, who's there? I wanted to see, like, not who's your logo and what is your value proposition and what's your website, but who are you, right? And that has resulted and that has brought to my life, I would say to this day, some of the best friends I have that are friends for life. So yeah, it's about connecting human to human and understanding that what we do in this game of being entrepreneurs, and sometimes it's it's to be taken serious like any game, but at the same time it's a game, and behind it is life, and it's our path as individuals to grow in our on the mission we came to fulfill, and maybe your competitors are great allies for that. So yeah, that's the whole spirit, and that together with, of course, a lot of building an association. So we have ACOTUR, which is the Colombian Association of Responsible Tourism, which makes retreats and encounters, and we have a WhatsApp chat, and we have some values, and we really try to spread the values in the players, in the new players that are coming to the industry, the larger players that are out there that are not necessarily resonating with them, but we're really generating enough gravity for them to be attracted. So I think that's also like an institutional part of it to complement the answer.
Is there a sense of we're all in this together to grow the pie versus fighting over the same scraps?
Yeah, totally. Because you know that if there's a traveler that was quoting with 3 different companies and I didn't get the business, but they came with my colleague, and if this traveler is happy, he's going to bring 10 more travelers. So there's going to be more for all of us, right? So it's in my best interest for my colleagues to be successful. And even it's incredible in this WhatsApp chat that I told you about, there are situations in which, there's a competitor, quote unquote competitor, who is in trouble. Like, hey, my specialized guide who is specific to this gold museum and speaks Italian canceled last minute. I need someone with the same profile. It's amazing. You'll see people who just throwing context at him, and as opposed to other kind of marketplaces, people would be like, no, let him drown. Let's keep him that bad review from the customer. No. We don't want that. We all want 5-star reviews for every single experience in Colombia, and that's what we're thriving as an industry.
You mentioned receiving quotes that come in. You do operate as a DMC. We have a lot of operators in our community who are trying to either win quotes or find the right DMC partner. What have you learned in your experience as the DMC about what makes a strong and quality relationship with an operator that's hiring you to work in Colombia for them?
Oh man, do you have an extra hour, Mitch?
Let me just clear my calendar for a minute.
But I'll go straight to the point, and I'm just gonna talk to fellow DMCs who are out there. I mean, we're not perfect. We still have so many challenges. Actually, This morning, I just sent an email to all the people that I want to work with abroad because we're still haven't really find the secret of that, and we really want to get better at this. But there's a couple of things that we have understood to this point. Number one is to really understand where you create value. A lot of DMCs have a model that is very commercial, and they rely on local operators for their operations, and they don't really have a lot of involvement in their operations, which is fine. But if that's the case, be the best curator as possible and understand also the market dynamics, and that if you're not creating experiences and if you're not going through this whole process of creation and going there and investing and going to the field and all that, you have to be competitive and expect lower margins. So that's one thing, and it's understand your business model and be coherent with it in terms of your unit economics. The other thing that I would suggest that we started incorporating very recently and has been very successful is total transparency. We break down every single cost of every single trip to the penny. And that's great. At the beginning, it was hard because it's like disclosing a lot of information, and that's sometimes your secret sauce. But believe me, it pays off. In two regards. Now, number one, it keeps you accountable to really bring the value for each step of the trip. And number two, it makes way easier for your customer to co-create with you when you break down the costs, and they can choose like, why is this experience so expensive? And you explain, and you know how to explain it. You know why the value that this experience creates, it's okay. So you build trust. And again, you give them tools to iterate. And if they have to reach a certain budget, they can decide what to cross or what to change. So it makes this iteration process much more collaborative and not like a black box of misinformation and misalignment. So I just going to add these two things that we have learned.
Devil's advocate, what's stopping them from going and working directly with everyone and cutting you out?
Well, if that happens, we're not really adding much value. And I think if we don't care. If that happens, we don't really care. We have had customers who they don't have a massive business. Maybe they have one trip a year and they feel like they want to work directly with one of our allies. And we celebrate that because it means that our allies are ready to the point of being mature enough that they can bring to the table their own business and they can develop this business for themselves and not depend on us. So that's success for us. But in most cases, we add value because there's many things that our allies are not going to be able to manage, like doing everything in one payment and cancellation policies, booking policies, insurance, liability, response time. In case anything goes wrong, have like a great operational team that is on the ground spread across Colombia to actually, in some cases, go to the hotel and solve a situation, right? And that's the kind of things that if you have operations from other country and you're trying to reach individually this guy here and this hotel there, maybe you can run a trip. If you're lucky, you're not going to have any trouble, but that's not as scalable in terms of the value chain. So we have had that, and if it happens, we even disclose the context. Like, can you give me the contact of your guide? Oh, sure, take it, call him. If there's anything that you need to talk directly with the guide, is no problem. So yeah, I'm not afraid of that.
Rodrigo, this is a radical message that I want the world to hear. Like, what a cool way to think about being a business, because it's so much often about protecting your IP, your special sauce, and being terrified that an operator is going to come in and circumvent you. I love I don't know, is it this like Colombian, this Colombian style? Like, hey, who cares? We'll figure it out. It's amazing. You know, I just had a conversation right before I was talking to you right now. I had a phone call with somebody who runs a very, very large walking tour company. And he actually helps and encourages and mentors his guides who come to him and say, I want to start my own walking tour company. And he says, I do that because I don't want them to see me as this like evil other that they have to kind of like go and then like compete against. He says, I'm going to help them discover their niche. I'm going to help them because I want them as individuals to grow and improve and be on their own path. And he said 50% of them come back and work for me because they realize how hard it is and that it's not a path to riches, and that like suddenly taking on all of that responsibility and establishing trust and marketing and acquiring customers is horrible. And so they come back as better guides and better employees because of that process.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that's also a mentality that there's a great TED talk. I don't remember her name, but it's the theory of growth versus thrive, and why a lot of the social and environmental emergency that we're seeing is because we have been building on infinite growth, and we have built corporations and structures that need for infinite growth for them to thrive. So why do we move on to think about thriving instead of growing, because growing forever is not sustainable? So as a company, we don't aim to grow huge. We got to the point that we can be selective of the kind of people we want to work with. We have everything we need. We travel around. I just recently had a daughter. She's in great health. I'm not afraid of lacking. So if you see this abundance, and if you realize that there's abundance in everywhere, and if you can just thrive and be stronger and be more healthy instead of just growing just by the mere fact of the number, I think, at least in my opinion, that's the kind of life I want to live.
Are you talking about Kate Rayworth, the Donut Economics, all that? Love that. Love that. Love the book. Love the TED Talk. And okay, all right, we need to stop. I promised you this would only be an hour, but I just want to keep picking your brain. The this is all incredibly helpful reframing for, I think, our community that is trying to figure out how to do the right thing, how to be meaningful, how to be a successful business, how to provide value, how to build these partnerships. How it's a lot of plates to spin and to juggle. And so, what last question, I promise. What keeps it all spinning for you? Like, what is at the center of you feeling alive in what you're doing as an operator and as a DMC?
I think it's the people that I'm surrounded by. I would say, yeah, my team, my business partner, my wife. It's I really believe that the quality of life is totally proportional to the quality of your relationships, and not only me, but I think there are very serious studies in happiness that point that to the fact that it's all about the relationships. So for me, it's that, and it's taking care of these relationships and nurturing them, and sharing passions with them, and yeah, it's that. It's relationships.
Okay, one last question. What I promise is that when do you know when to say no? Or
When it's against our values.
but there's so much opportunity. I imagine you see so much out there that you could grow and develop and do. A client that wants something very special, when do you say no to the lesbians and the dinners and the special orders, and stay focused and don't get caught up?
Oh, that's a very tough question. For me, top of mind is if it goes against our values as an organization, which are aligned with our personal values, it feels in your body. You can feel it somewhere. You can feel it in your tummy or somewhere in your chest. It's like you're uncomfortable. So it really feels when there's something that is not resonating.
Rodrigo, thank you for this beautiful conversation. I really, really appreciate your insights and the way in which I think you've blown up the playbook for a lot of our community out there, and how they think about a lot of this. We'll put show notes and information on tourpreneur.com, including ways to contact him if you have the solution to solving sex tourism in Colombia. And otherwise, Rodrigo, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and helping the community.
Okay, I appreciate you, Mitch.